You know that feeling, right? That sudden sinking sensation of being just completely unmoored.
Oh, totally. Like the gravity you've always relied on just turns off out of nowhere.
Exactly. And you're just floating there, totally disconnected from whatever used to, anchor your identity. It's this really profound, almost visceral state of, well, existential displacement, I guess you could call it.
Right. And it can hit you anywhere.
Yeah, like it hits when you're staring at the ceiling in a new apartment in some city where you literally do not know a single soul. Or, even in the middle of a crowded room when you suddenly realize that the dynamics of this lifelong relationship have just fundamentally fractured.
It's terrifying, honestly, because it's the realization that the external scaffolding holding your life together has shifted.
Right. And suddenly you just do not know where you stand anymore. So if you are listening to this right now and you're recognizing that exact flavor of vertigo, well, today's deep dive is built entirely around dismantling that sensation.
And we really need to dismantle it because that vertigo is, arguably the defining psychological malady of the 21st century.
Oh, 100%.
We are living in this hypermobile, super rapidly shifting society, right? The traditional anchors geography, lifelong career tracks, extended family units, they are just constantly being disrupted.
So constantly.
Yeah, and the diagnosis of this condition feels incredibly modern. But the fascinating part of our focus today is that the most surgical, effective cure for it was actually written down thousands of years ago.
Yeah, which is wild to think about. We're pulling from a daily study excerpt today that unpacks two ancient philosophical verses, specifically shlokas 6.3 and 6.31.
Right, the really heavy hitters.
Yeah, they are. And the mission of this deep dive is to extract the ultimate reward that's promised in these texts, which they define as absolute spiritual security and an unbroken connection to the divine.
Which sounds like a really tall order, I know.
It does. But for the learner out there, we are not going to treat this like some esoteric, dusty history lesson. We are translating this ancient philosophy into a highly practical, honestly kind of ruthless toolkit for navigating the chaos of like a random Tuesday morning.
Exactly. The absolute beauty of this text is its insistence that achieving this profound peace, it doesn't require abandoning the material world.
Right, you don't have to flee to a mountaintop ashram or anything.
No, not at all. So the source material, it diagnoses the root cause of our displacement by pointing to what it calls profound shifts.
Profound shifts. Okay.
And it isolates the specific arenas where these shifts happen, starting with, well, the phases of our lives. Because when you think about human development, every major transition requires this almost violent shedding of a former identity.
Like going from college into the workforce.
Right. A student transitioning into a young professional or, a professional transitioning into retirement, you experience a total collapse of your previous metric for success and daily purpose.
I mean, you spend decades building up this identity, and then overnight society is just like, cool, you're something else now.
Exactly. And the text observes that human identity is almost exclusively anchored to these external factors. We build our internal sense of self out of these transient external materials.
And when those materials inevitably decay or just change, the internal structure collapses with it. We also see this like violently applied to our physical environments too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we are fundamentally spatial creatures.
Yeah, we orient our sense of safety and predictability geographically. The source points out how changing physical environments, like moving across the country or getting priced out of your neighborhood, or even just, I don't know, adapting to a totally new office layout, it forces the brain into a state of hypervigilance.
Right, because you lose the automaticity of your day. You can't run on autopilot anymore.
Exactly. You have to consciously process new routes, new cultural norms, new sensory inputs, and it is biologically exhausting.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that exhaustion just compounds when we factor in the third arena, which is the shifting architecture of our social lives.
Oh, the relationships.
Yeah, relationships are essentially the mirrors we use to perceive ourselves. So when friendships fade because of distance or marriages dissolve or, kids become autonomous and leave the home.
This is the empty nest syndrome, yeah.
Right. The mirrors we rely on are suddenly just gone, or they're reflecting a completely different image back at us.
Which is so disorienting.
Totally. So the text diagnoses this combination of shifting life phases, changing geographies, and evolving relationships as the engine of our dislocation. We tie our internal stability to a reality that is, by its very physical nature, just guaranteed to change.
Okay, but I have to challenge the premise here on behalf of you, the listener. Let's unpack this a bit.
Go for it.
If profound shifts across our life phases, our locations, and our relationships are just the structural reality of existing in time and space, isn't feeling dislocated just the default biological setting?
That's a really fair question.
Right. I mean, our nervous systems literally evolved to alert us when our environment changes because a changed environment used to mean like a potential predator in the bushes.
Right, it's a survival mechanism.
Exactly. So, is the text suggesting that we are philosophically failing when we feel this anxiety? It seems incredibly harsh to frame a normal, healthy human stress response to massive life changes as some sort of, I don't know, spiritual defect.
I'm really glad you brought that up because the source text goes out of its way to avoid condemning the feeling itself. It absolutely does not frame the stress of a divorce or a cross-country move as a spiritual failure.
Oh, okay. So it's not saying we're broken for feeling stressed out.
No, not at all. It acknowledges these profound shifts as the fundamental, inescapable reality of navigating the material universe. The text is not demanding that you somehow stop experiencing change, nor is it asking you to suppress the biological reality of stress.
Then what is it demanding?
It's analyzing the strategy we use to cope with the change. The suffering, according to the text, comes from our stubborn insistence on using a rushing river as our anchor point.
Ah, wow. A Russian river.
Yeah, we're throwing an anchor into a violent current, and then we're sitting there wondering why we are still being dragged downstream.
That is such a good visual. We are trying to find permanence in domains that are literally defined by impermanence.
Exactly. We demand that our jobs never change, that our partners never evolve, and that our bodies never age.
And when they do, because they have to, we feel betrayed by the universe rather than recognizing that we simply placed our anchor in the wrong substance.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And to articulate how we actually shift that anchor, the source text offers this incredibly visceral modern analogy that I just love.
The long-haul flight one, right? Let's get into that.
Yeah, so it asks us to visualize boarding a long-haul flight in India and stepping off the plane half a world away in New York.
Which is a brutal flight, by the way.
Oh, it's exhausting. But this analogy is a perfect crucible for examining dislocation because a long-haul flight compresses all those profound shifts we just talked about into a highly concentrated, 15-hour window.
Right. It's like life phases sped up to 100 miles an hour.
Exactly. When you board the plane in India, your sensory reality is grounded in a specific culture, a specific climate, a specific language, and a specific social rhythm.
Everything is familiar.
Yes. And then you are sealed in a metal tube, suspended miles above the earth, utterly disconnected from the ground. You cross multiple time zones, and the text specifically emphasizes that even the fundamental rhythm of day and night is inverted.
Right. Your whole circadian rhythm is just trashed. And then you land in New York, and the external landscape has been entirely overwritten.
That's a completely different world.
Yeah, the architecture is like brutalist steel and glass instead of what you left behind.
Yeah.
The auditory landscape is different. The social expectations have shifted. If your sense of reality and safety was anchored strictly to the ground you were standing on when you boarded,
Then, landing in New York would induce absolute psychological collapse.
totally. The text uses this intense spatial and cultural transition to demonstrate how easily we feel unmoored by external transitions.
But then the analogy pivots to reveal this profound ontological duality.
Right.
The flight itself represents the unavoidable radical shifts of modern life, the career changes, the aging process, the sudden tragedies.
Right.
But the text asks a vital question. What happens the moment you walk out of the automatic doors of the airport in New York?
Okay, what does happen?
The external circumstances have radically shifted, right? The landscape is alien. Yet you are breathing the exact same air, and you are warmed by the exact same sun.
Oh, man. So good.
The text highlights these fundamental life-sustaining elements as an unbroken, omnipresent constant.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Think about it. You don't pack the sun in your checked luggage.
Could you imagine?
Right. You don't carry a canister of oxygen onto the plane terrified that New York might have run out of air while you were flying. You possess this absolute unspoken trust in the universality of those physical elements.
You don't even second-guess it for a moment.
No. And the source is using the undeniable reality of the physical world to bridge the gap to a metaphysical promise. It sets up the sun and the air to demonstrate that spiritual security is equally omnipresent. It's waiting for you regardless of the coordinates of your life.
The psychological mechanism at play here is fascinating, honestly, because we intuitively trust the constants of the physical universe, but we operate with profound scarcity when it comes to our internal spiritual universe.
We really do.
We just assume that if our external circumstances become chaotic, our internal peace must be entirely destroyed.
Right.
We treat our spiritual stability as this fragile little object that can be lost in transit.
Rather than treating it like the sun, which remains entirely unaffected by whatever landscape it happens to be illuminating.
Exactly. And this directly tees up the ancient verse the source is analyzing, shloka 6.3.
Okay, let's get into the text itself. The translation provided in the study reads, "For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me."
It's a beautiful verse.
It is. And the text explicitly links this verse to the concept of absolute spiritual security. In a modern existence where nothing is guaranteed, where, financial markets crash, health deteriorates, and institutions fail, this verse has the absolute audacity to promise an absolute.
It does. But the absolute nature of the promise is contingent upon a radical shift in human perception. The verse begins with a strict condition. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me.
Right, there's a prerequisite.
Exactly. The text references a previous day's study here, noting that this refers to the discipline of perceiving the underlying divine spark, the conscious essence in all beings and situations, looking past the outward material differences.
So you have to train your cognitive apparatus to look past the alien landscape of New York and consciously recognize the sun.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
So what does this all mean for us? The phrasing of the promise is deeply revealing, right? I am never lost. It places the divine, the ultimate reality, as a static, immovable constant.
Yes, immovable.
It implies that our entire concept of feeling lost or disconnected is fundamentally flawed. If the ultimate reality is never lost, does this mean my sensation of being distant from my purpose or my peace is just an illusion?
That's exactly what it means.
I mean, I might hypothesize that when I get fired from a job, I have been pushed miles away from my spiritual center, but the text seems to be arguing that the distance itself is a fabrication of the panicked mind.
It is entirely a fabrication. The text frames the anxiety of dislocation entirely as an optical illusion. It's a failure of perception rather than a reality of physical or spiritual distance.
That is wild to wrap your head around.
It is. Because when you feel disconnected from your internal anchor, it is because you have become exclusively fixated on the transient changes in your environment. You are staring so intently at the shifting clouds, agonizing over their shapes and the shadows they cast, that you have logically deduced the sun has just ceased to exist.
Wow.
But when you reorient your perception to recognize that the ultimate reality underpins everything, you realize separation is impossible. You cannot be lost from something that constitutes the very fabric of where you were standing.
Okay, think about breaking through a heavy storm system in an airplane. On the tarmac, the world is gray, violent, and claustrophobic. You just assume the entire world is steeped in misery.
Right, because that's all you can see.
But the moment the plane punches through the cloud cover, you are blinded by brilliant, unyielding sunshine. The sun was doing exactly what it always does, radiating immense energy.
The storm didn't diminish the sun by a single watt.
Exactly. It merely obstructed your local view of it. Our changing lives, the tragedies and the triumphs, they are the weather systems. The text demands that we perceive the constant radiation behind the localized storms.
But that structural reality introduces a massive practical challenge, which the listener is likely grappling with right now.
I definitely am.
Because acknowledging that the sun is always shining above the clouds is philosophically comforting, sure, but we still have to live and work down here in the rain.
Yeah, we still have to pay rent.
Exactly. And a natural defense mechanism arises when confronting ancient philosophy like this. It's the assumption that maintaining this unbroken perception of the divine requires isolating oneself from the noise of the material world.
Yes. There is this deeply ingrained belief that absolute spiritual security demands asceticism. Like, you must abandon your chaotic life, your mortgage, and your endless inbox to maintain this pure vision.
It's the classic trope.
I fall into that trap constantly. When the stress peaks, my immediate fantasy is to run away to a silent retreat in a forest where literally no one can ask me for anything ever again.
We all have that fantasy, honestly.
We culturally equate spiritual depth with geographical isolation, but the source text aggressively dismantles this Himalayan cave trope in its analysis of the very next verse, shloka 6.31.
Yes, and this is where it gets really practical. The verse centers on the phrase sarvata vartamanopi, which translates to regardless of circumstance.
Regardless of circumstances.
Right. The verse describes an individual who is established in oneness, worshiping the divine as residing in all beings. And the promise that follows is revolutionary for its time, and
Yeah.
really for ours too.
What's the promise?
It says that person dwells in the divine regardless of circumstances and regardless of how they live. The text explicitly asserts that true spirituality is not contingent upon your external environment.
That is so freeing.
It is. It's equally valid and accessible whether you are actively navigating the corporate world, enjoying a quiet retirement, or traveling across oceans.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here and put this to the ultimate stress test.
Let's do it.
Because it is easy to be established in oneness when you are, like, gardening on a Sunday afternoon, right? But what if you are a litigator cross-examining a hostile witness? What if you are a nurse dealing with an abusive patient?
Those are very real scenarios.
Right. What if your boss actively undermines your career every single day? The text demands that we maintain this connection by viewing all beings with love and respect. How on earth do you reconcile the brutal reality of an adversarial world with a command for universal love?
It sounds impossible at first glance.
It does. If I am fighting for my career against a toxic manager, doesn't being established in oneness just turn me into a passive victim? Am I just supposed to let them roll over me?
This is the absolute crux of applied philosophy.
Yeah.
The common misunderstanding is that being established in oneness dictates your external actions, forcing you into absolute passivity or, like, naive compliance.
Okay.
However, the text frames this as a profound internal shift in ontological orientation. Establishing oneness means recognizing the fundamental architecture of reality, that the divine spark animates the toxic boss, just as it animates you.
Right.
It is the recognition of shared underlying existence. It absolutely does not mandate that you tolerate their behavior or abandon your boundaries.
Oh, I see. So you are separating the internal orientation from the external execution.
Exactly.
I can still ruthlessly prosecute a legal case. I can still aggressively negotiate a contract or fire an abusive employee, but the mechanism of action changes.
How so?
I execute those necessary material boundaries without the internal rod of hatred, without dehumanizing the person sitting across from me. I interact with their transient, flawed behavior, their weather, while silently acknowledging their permanent sky.
Yes, and the psychological liberation in that approach is staggering.
I bet.
Because when you fight someone out of hatred or ego, your internal state becomes entirely dependent on their actions. You grant them the power to destroy your peace. You literally become a hostage to their dysfunction.
You give them the keys to your nervous system.
Exactly. But when you operate from a baseline of regardless of circumstances, as shloka 6.31 outlines, you sever their access to your internal anchor.
That makes so much sense.
You handle the material conflict with cold, effective precision, precisely because your spiritual security is not caught in the crossfire. You establish the ultimate boundary.
Yeah.
You can make my material life difficult, but you have zero jurisdiction over my internal peace.
Wow. Okay, so moving from the abstract philosophy of boundaries to the granular reality of a Tuesday morning, the source text actually provides a highly pragmatic three-part guide for what it calls negotiating today.
It's a great action plan.
It really is. The first practice is titled Find the Constant in the Change. And it takes the grand metaphors of international flights and geography and shrinks them down to the scale of like a disrupted calendar invite or a suddy argument.
Right. The text offers a specific psychological framework for these moments of microdislocation.
What's the framework?
It advises that when you feel overwhelmed by a shifting circumstance today, you must actively deploy the mechanism of cognitive distancing. It provides this striking formulation. The environment around you is just weather. Your connection to the self is the sky behind it.
The distinction between weather and sky is an absolute masterclass in emotional regulation. Let's dissect the mechanics of a hurricane for a second.
Okay.
When you are standing in a Category 5 storm, the sensory input is overwhelmingly violent. The wind is deafening, the rain is blinding, and the destruction feels absolute. It demands your complete attention, and it feels like it will last forever.
It's all-consuming.
But the fundamental nature of weather is transient. It is born out of shifting atmospheric pressures, it expends its energy, and eventually it dissolves.
Right. And in contrast, consider the sky. The sky is not an object. It is the infinite space in which the weather occurs.
Yes.
A hurricane, no matter its ferocity, cannot damage the sky. It cannot tear the sky, it can't stain the sky, or blow the sky away.
It just exists within it.
Exactly. The sky simply holds the space for the violent energy to pass through. When modern psychology utilizes cognitive behavioral therapy, it trains patients to separate their core identity from their passing emotional states. The ancient text is executing the exact same intervention.
So when your morning commute devolves into an absolute nightmare of traffic and aggressive drivers, the biological reflex is to fuse your identity with the stress. You say, I am angry, my day is ruined.
You become the hurricane.
You become the hurricane. The text demands that you step back and say, a severe weather system of frustration has just rolled into my awareness. I will observe it, I will navigate the car, but it does not alter my sky.
You allow the stress to pass through your system without attaching your identity to it. You remain perfectly intact before, during, and after the localized storm.
Identifying as the sky rather than the weather is the practical application of being established in oneness. It is how you survive the profound shifts without feeling unmoored.
It's the survival guide, yeah. But the text does not allow us to merely sit back and passively observe our own internal weather. The second practice in the action plan forces us to actually engage with the external world,
Right, it introduces the concept of worship through interaction.
which is a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. The source instructs us to treat our interactions not as mundane chores, but as quiet acts of devotion. It gives an incredibly pedestrian example, listening patiently to a family member to honor the divine spark within them.
It completely strips the concept of worship of its grandiose institutional trappings.
Yes, it takes the sacred out of the temple and drops it right onto the kitchen counter while you are washing the dishes.
The historical context of this is just profound. In many ancient traditions, ritualistic worship was a highly specialized, totally separate sphere of life.
Something you did on a specific day, in a specific building.
Exactly. But by defining worship as the quality of attention you grant to another human being during a mundane interaction, the text bridges the gap between the sacred and the profane.
It makes everyday life the ritual.
It asserts that residing in all beings means that the way you listen to your spouse vent about a frustrating email is neurologically and spiritually equivalent to a sacred ritual. You are honoring the underlying the sun inside of them.
Okay, but practically speaking, this sounds like a recipe for ultimate burnout.
How so?
Well, if every time my partner wants to complain about their day, I have to elevate myself to a state of quiet devotion, the pressure is immense. Usually when someone is venting to me about something tedious, my internal monologue is screaming about all the other things I need to get done.
Oh, sure. You're mentally writing your grocery list.
Right. If I now have to treat that tedious conversation as a high-stakes spiritual test, it feels like it would drain whatever energy I have left. Doesn't it just add more pressure?
I get why you'd think that, but the exhaustion you are describing does not come from the act of listening.
It doesn't.
No, it comes from the friction of your ego resisting the moment. When your internal monologue is screaming about what you should be doing instead, your ego is aggressively fighting the reality of the present moment. You are expending massive amounts of psychological energy trying to mentally alter the weather.
Oh, wow.
By reframing the interaction as a quiet act of devotion, you bypass the ego entirely.
Because the devotion aspect removes the expectation of utility. I am no longer evaluating the conversation based on whether it is interesting or productive for me.
Precisely. You remove the pressure to fix their problem, judge their narrative, or perform empathy. You're simply practicing the discipline of holding space, of witnessing the divine spark in another consciousness.
And because I'm no longer resisting the reality of the interaction, the friction drops to zero.
Yes. Paradoxically, treating a mundane conversation as a sacred act of devotion requires significantly less energy than treating it as an annoying obstacle. You become the sky, allowing their weather to pass through your awareness with detached love and respect.
That's incredible. But let's be honest, the reality of human nature is that we are going to fail at this constantly.
Oh, daily. Hourly.
Right. We will inevitably snap at our kids. We will get completely hijacked by a stressful email and forget the sky even exists. We will treat our partners like obstacles instead of divine sparks.
It's part of being human.
But when that happens, the modern spiritual reflex is this deep, agonizing guilt. We feel like we have ruined our progress and drifted miles away from our values.
The phenomenon of wellness guilt or spiritual guilt is rampant right now.
It really is, like when you lose your streak on a meditation app and you feel like a failure.
Exactly. We approach our internal development with the exact same capitalist metrics we use for our careers. If we miss a week of meditation or lose our temper in traffic, we view it as a catastrophic loss of accumulated capital.
We construct a narrative that we have wandered off the path. and that we must now undertake an exhausting, punitive journey to earn our way back to baseline.
But the final practice outlined in the text specifically dismantles this destructive narrative.
Thank goodness. The text calls this third practice, release the fear of being lost.
It's so beautiful.
It directly invokes the promise from verse 6.30, I am never lost to you. The text offers what might be the most relieving sentence in the entire study. It assures you that being consumed by the material world does not sever the connection.
Not even a little bit.
It explicitly states that you do not need to journey back to find peace. You simply need to open your eyes to what is already surrounding you.
This destroys the linear geographical metaphor of a spiritual journey. If absolute spiritual security is truly an omnipresent constant, like the sun or the air, then you cannot physically or mentally travel away from it.
You can't outrun the sky.
No, you can't. The distance you feel when you are caught in a cycle of anger or distraction is purely a cognitive illusion. The text is demanding that you drop the narrative of the grueling trek back up the mountain.
Because there is no distance to cover, because you never actually left, you were just staring at the mud instead of looking at the sky.
Exactly.
The reconnection is not a process, it is instantaneous. The absolute fraction of a second you remember that you are the sky, the connection is fully reestablished.
Boom, you're back.
You don't have to apologize to the universe for being distracted. You don't have to do penance. You just open your eyes and let the omnipresent reality flood back in.
The profound shifts of modern life, the evolving phases, the changing geographies, the volatile relationships, they will continually command our attention.
They have to. They are the rushing river of the material world.
Right. But the core architecture, provided by shlokas 6.3 and 6.31, ensures that our foundational identity does not have to be swept away by those currents. We can engage fully with the chaos, while our anchor rests securely on the immovable bedrock beneath the water.
Let's pull all these threads together. We started by diagnosing that deeply unsettling sensation of dislocation, analyzing how it stems from tying our identity to transient external circumstances.
Just shifting phases, places, and relationships.
Exactly. Then we utilize the sensory shock of the long-haul flight to distinguish between the shifting landscapes of our lives and the underlying omnipresent constants.
The weather versus the sun and the air.
Right. And then we unpack the promise of shloka 6.3, realizing that absolute spiritual security is achieved by piercing the optical illusion of distance and recognizing the ultimate reality everywhere.
We then explored the radical liberation of shloka 6.31, proving that maintaining this profound connection does not require escaping to a Himalayan cave.
No caves required.
Exactly. It is achieved right in the center of the corporate boardroom or the messy kitchen by operating from a baseline of oneness, regardless of external friction.
And finally, we translated this into daily action by utilizing cognitive distancing to separate the sky from the weather, transforming mundane interactions into egoless devotion, and immediately discarding the guilt of feeling lost.
It's a complete toolkit.
It really is. When you integrate this framework into the granular reality of your day, it completely alters the function of your stress. Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with, drawing directly from the mechanics we have discussed.
Yeah, let's leave them with something to chew on.
The text insists that peace only requires us to open our eyes to the constant that is already here.
Think back to the vertigo of existential displacement we started with. We inherently view the pain of those profound shifts, the heartbreak, the career upheaval, the loss of identity, as catastrophic obstacles blocking our path to peace.
Because that's what they feel like.
Totally. But if the ultimate reality is everywhere, what if that pain serves a completely different function? What if those moments of feeling totally unmoored and devastated by the loss of your external anchors are not obstacles at all?
What are they then?
What if they are highly calibrated, necessary alarms designed to violently shake you awake from your reliance on transient things so you are finally forced to look up and see the sky that was holding you all along?
Man. The profound shifts might not be ruining your peace. They might be the only things capable of reminding you where your peace actually lives. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you head out into whatever weather system your day is generating, try to locate the sun. Remember that you are the sky, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.